Imagine an extraordinary circumstance, a coincidence occurs, where everybody in this room realized that all of us were actually together previously at some other event. The ones who've been here for years, and the ones who just recently joined our community. Even Molly's daughter was there. Even Max's new wife was there. We were all there before, and we're back again. Let's say tonight, we go into the social hall for the oneg, and at one table, two people were talking, and someone says, mentions they were at a football game in 1978. It was the Steelers against the Rams. And someone else at the table says, I was at that game. And then someone else at the table says, wait, what are you talking about? I was at that game. And people at the other table start hearing the ruckus. They say, what's going on? We just realized everybody at our table was at the same football game in 1978, Steelers-Rams. I was there. Wait, I was there. And we realize at the end, the whole room was all at the exact same game at the same time. How would we feel? First, we'd be amazed at the coincidence, but then we think something's going on. And perhaps we would feel some kind of cosmic kinship, of connection with everyone. Because though we seem to meet for the first time, we actually were together before. Now that is an outrageous hypothetical. But in a way, it's actually true for all of us here tonight. Because we who are gathered here in this sanctuary have been together before, and it was thousands of years ago at Mount Sinai, entering into the covenant with all of our people Israel, entering into the covenant with God. Now, you would think that we weren't there, because though each of us is getting older, we're not that old. But according to the legends of our people, the midrash of our sages, those who entered into the covenant Sinai was not just the generation that was alive in that moment, but actually every generation that would come to be was present. Our souls were present. Now, in Jewish tradition, our souls are eternal. We normally think of that into the future eternal, that after we die, our soul is eternal, living on forever in God's presence. But a soul being eternal works in both directions, future and past. And according to our midrash, each of our souls is as ancient as time itself. From the very beginning of creation, each of our souls were created. Each of our souls was waiting in heaven. Each of our souls was just waiting for our bodies to be born. And God would infuse the soul into each baby. And the evidence of this is the little indentation over our lip. Because there's a midrash that when the soul gets put into the body by I believe the Archangel Gabriel, who presses against, sort of pushes it in and leaves a little mark right there above our lips. So before we were born, our souls were in existence. And when it came time for the covenant ceremony, God gathered, of course, all of the people of Israel alive in that day, but also the souls of everyone who would one day be born into Israel. And not just them, also the souls of everyone who would one day choose Judaism as a Jew by choice, as a convert. Because according to our tradition, those who choose Judaism, their soul was always Jewish, just happened to be born into a different circumstance, and finally is reclaiming and coming back around to where the soul belonged all along. So the Midrash accomplishes something very important in legal terms, and that is it binds all of us as the primary generation who stood at Sinai. None of us can say, well, I don't want this covenant and I don't need to follow the terms. I never agreed to this. Well, as it turns out, we were there at Sinai. And when the people of Israel said to God, all that you have said, all that you have asked of us, we will do. It turns out we all said that too, in that first moment. Now, it's an outrageous concept to think that everyone was there until you look at the actual text itself that suggests it. So we're going to take a moment now to look at our Torah portion, Nitzavim. And if you like this week's Torah portion, you're going to hear it again on Yom Kippur morning. Deuteronomy chapter 29. Atem Nitzavim. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. Your tribal heads, your elders, your officials, the men of Israel, the children, the women, even the stranger within your camp, from the wood chopper to the water drawer, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is concluding with you this day, with its sanctions, to the end that God may establish you this day as God's people and be your God, as God had indeed promised and swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then this passage. I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but with those who are standing here with us this day before the Lord our God, and those who are not with us here this day. So the text says, this is for everybody, this generation and every generation. That was the opening with which the rabbis insert the teachings, that we were all there. And so, friends, as you look around the room, you look familiar. We've been together before. It's nice to see you again. How have you been? This idea that we were all here together binds us in a way that's very powerful. It builds a kinship of common experience, which is true in reality, as so many of us share a common history of our people, our ancestors, our experience. Stories of our childhood are similar to the stories of other members' childhoods, and we feel a bond of connection even with the people we're just meeting for the first time. An example. Just last week, Elaine and I made a day trip to Boca to visit our son Leo, who's in college there. And we took Leo out to lunch, and we were at lunch, and we were talking about the Don't Say Gay bill and the effect that it's having right now in Sarasota County schools. And as some of you know, Elaine is particularly passionate about that cause, and so we were talking about it, and the woman at the table next to us, an older woman with a New York, Brooklyn accent, says, I heard what you were saying, and I just want to say, I absolutely agree with you 100%. Now, you know and I know very little about that woman, except we all know that she's Jewish. She gave us 4 clear signs, really, not just signs, like evidence that could be used in court that she is Jewish. First of all, she's in Boca. Second of all, her accent was New Yorkish. Third, she was liberal. And 4, she had no sense of boundary and just butted right into our conversation from the next table over. No one else does that. So Jews do that. We interrupt. You're talking, I'm talking. That's a natural cultural thing. That's part of the kinship that we felt with. Elaine, by the way, asked her, "Do you have a place to go for the holidays?" Just immediately, like we just knew. We just know. But we have this culture, this interrupting. If you're talking about, then I, should talk too. And it's interesting enough because even though Elaine's Jewish, this has actually been an issue in our marriage because I apparently interrupt her all the time, and she doesn't like it, she tells me. And I don't understand because I'm not like she's talking about one thing and I'm going to interrupt and just talk about something else. I'm talking about the subject that she's bringing up, and I see it as engagement, like I'm showing interest in the... and then we had a scholar here 2-3 years ago from Los Angeles, from the Hebrew Union College, who was a linguist and an expert, you remember, in Jewish languages like Yiddish and Ladino, and it turns out there's 100 of them. And this was her expertise, and she talked about Jewish language. And one of the things she says is that Jews, it's not interrupting. She had a name for it, and I think it was called overlapping talk. It's just it's a style of interaction called overlap, where you just talk simultaneously. And in that moment, all I could think was vindication. So, because I grew up in, just in a small community, surrounded by Jews, and Elaine grew up, and both of her parents are from East Texas, and she grew up in, a little bit more of a society. I don't know, whatever it is, it's a little more formal. All I know is her family doesn't like it that I eat off their plates. They eat like this because they're like worried. They know me, they're very careful. But it's just, it's a cultural thing of this sort of lack of boundaries and this, this comfort. I learned this, like I said, we grew up in this, little very Jewish community. And then when I was in middle school, my parents moved with me we moved to Maine. And there's a lot fewer Jews in Maine. And the neighborhood we moved into was there were not a lot of Jews around. And the neighbors invited my parents over for dinner. I don't know why I wasn't there. I must have had something else going on, because my parents came back and tried to tell me about the dinner they just experienced. They went to dinner, and it was the couple, and it was a very waspy family, like old, been in Portland, Maine for generations, and they had 2 teenage sons in high school. And my parents were describing to me, because they had never experienced anything like this, dinner was silent.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And one person at a time spoke. The parents did. And the 2 teenage boys, in high school age boys, never said a word unless they were specifically spoken to, and then they would respond to the question asked and speak no more. And my parents, in amazement, came back and told me about this experience, and I couldn't imagine it, and wanted to experience it too. They were older than I was. It wasn't, but I did come to experience it in other occasions too. But I remembered the 3 of us marveling over this. I completely lost track of this. So here's what I was trying to say. There's something about being part of this covenant that has sort of an instant familiarity that Jews have with other Jews. And part of it comes from just our cultural association. And part of it comes from the fact that we've been together before. At Sinai thousands of years ago, but also on that ship that came to Ellis Island, and also fleeing Spain in 1492. Like, we have this common heritage. And there's something else also that I'd like to point out, is that it even is true of non-Jews who are part of our community. I find a very easy kinship with the non-Jewish spouses who are part of our temple family, and religious school parents and so forth. And I think that it's not coincidental. Like, if someone chooses to marry a Jew, you gotta like Jews. Because we're 1%. Like, you had to find us out. Whatever it is, you like what we're bringing if you choose to marry a Jew. I don't think it's a random thing, like you fall in love with who you fall in love with. I think the people who like to associate with Jews have a disposition, a predilection, or a comfort. Maybe they have a yearning for being interrupted or something, or a comfort, or just something about it. And I think of Cynthia Roberts Green and Paul. So Cynthia didn't have to choose to work in a synagogue and then stay for 20 years. Something about 26 years, I should have said, right? We just celebrated 25th. Talk about interrupting. For 26 years. I don't think it's accidental that people who feel comfortable among Jews and choose, there is a commonality. And I guess to say there's also not a lot of surprises too. I'm meeting a lot of new members who are just joining. And they, you know, a lot of them say, you know, we want to get, you know, obviously you want to get to know you. They say, well, we want to get to know you, Rabbi. And I think you do. I think you're going to know me for the next 10 years, and there aren't going to be any surprises. I don't know where to take that or what to go, but that's what I've been thinking about today since I learned about Rabbi Aviva, and we pray for her well-being and look forward to a properly structured sermon coming up in 2 weeks.